Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Before we get rolling with today's show, I wanted to give a deep, heartfelt thanks to someone who has taken the time to rate and review the show in Apple Podcasts. This person writes, Brody rocks, leaves me 5 stars, and writes, this podcast has inspired me to take real concrete steps towards making my life more balanced and to take as good care of myself as I do of others. It's a bit sad that I feel I need permission from a health expert to embrace the radical ? Notion that taking care of oneself is in fact unselfish, but now I can get that conveniently delivered to my iPhone. Thanks, Brody. And thank you, Casey Richter, who really gets the message of this show. That absolutely is my mission in life, is to try to help give you self-care strategy and a reminder that self-care is not selfish. If you are a fan of this show, I would greatly appreciate you taking the time to rate and review it, because it enables other people to find out that this show even exists. It takes a lot of time and energy and money to provide you with this high quality content for free each and every week. And you would be doing someone else an amazing service by turning them on to the fact that this show is out there. So if you know somebody that could really benefit from internalizing that message that we are in fact allowed to take care of ourselves, and knowing how with some of the greatest experts out there, please let them know. Maybe forward them a favorite episode via your phone. And thank you, Casey Richter, who I suspect might be Casey Richter, my sister. Thanks. I love you, sweetie. Okay, now on to today's show. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brody Welch, licensed acupuncturist and self-care strategist. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most important issues that there is in the health space right now, and that is anxiety. An alarming number of people are dealing with chronic stress and anxiety, which, if you've listened to any real episode of this show in the past, you know can be related to virtually any other health problem that there is. My guest today is Stephanie Dalfonzo, and she's somebody that I already, even though I've never met her or talked to her until just a few minutes ago, I know is doing similar work in the world, and I'm excited to hear how she approaches anxiety with her clients. She has been speaking on the radio and on stages since the 1980s. Her first career was as Stevie Knox, a popular radio DJ, and after her last radio job, her anxiety kicked into such overdrive that it became full-blown insomnia. Since then, she's been researching holistic approaches to anxiety and is now a speaker and author and clinical hypnotist on the subject. She is hopefully inspiring us with simple action steps today, as she has freed thousands of people from tweens to 80-somethings from their anxiety, stress, and fears. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Brody. I was so looking forward to this. And then you and I started chatting a few minutes ago, and I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. It's I'm curious, just because I got started in my adventures in helping people deal with stress and anxiety. First, because it's something that I knew well personally. It's something that I do not come by calm easily. So I like to think of myself as a recovering type A, and and have figured out kind of like what it takes for me to have broken up with kind of chronic stress and anxiety, which isn't to say that I don't tip over into that space occasionally with the help of hormones. But in any case, I'm very curious as to what got you into this as your passion and professional focus.
It was personal experience.
Yeah.
I found myself when this insomnia took over, it was debilitating. And I'm in my kitchen one day, and it was something minor. The kids were bickering or whining, and I couldn't take it anymore. So smash, smash, smash. I'm smashing their treasured junk food treat, this bag of Cheetos, into smithereens. And they're crying, "Mommy, please stop." And I was like, okay, I'm out of control and I need to do something. So I did what most people would do, and that's go to the doctor and get a prescription. And it worked for a short time, and then it didn't, and things spiraled out of control even more. So I was like, okay, the medication is just a band-aid. This isn't working. So I was like, all right, I have to find my way out of this. And up until then, this is the like mind-blowing part to me, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. I was in my mid-30s. Up until then, I didn't know that I had been struggling with anxiety my whole life because that was all I knew. Like, I didn't know what calm was. I knew, what if, worry, worry, worry. That's all I knew. So when I started researching, that was the mid-90s. The internet was, just in its infancy, and there was no Google. So I was going to the library and getting every book and magazine and cassette tape to try and figure out, how do I get to the other side of this? And so where I think you and I have traveled similar paths is we both have this incredible toolbox, and yet they're very different from each other. And so, I totally believe that one size doesn't fit all. So, I think you would agree with the same thing with your toolbox. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, since I don't actually know what's in your toolbox. I'll be interested to see how much overlap there is. And certainly, yes, to there not being a one size fits all solution. I know that for some people it's meditation, for some people it's exercise, for some people it's getting inflammatory foods out of their diet. For almost everyone, there is a mindset shift that needs to take place in order to maintain, I think, in order to really break up with stress and anxiety. I find that people need to stop buying into whatever it is that they're buying into.
Well, yeah, because our fear and our self-limiting beliefs convince us that we can't get past it. So we have to make those belief shifts. Yeah. And then that's not enough. It's not a one and done. That's the thing.
Yeah.
In my book, Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom, I have 35 skills and techniques in there to be able to weave into daily life. Because, before I learned, I can do this and I can do this, I can do this. I learned EFT, which is like the self version of acupuncture.
I think EFT is an amazingly powerful tool. And it's one of those things that, if we look at the points individually, it's like, I don't know why I can't make a case for why those points as opposed to like a handful of other points. So to me, it's like almost arbitrary, like those point selections, but I do know that it works. And I do know that it's something that I love prescribing to my clients for self-care. It's an awesome thing.
And it augments what you do with them, Brody. It's not one or the other. It's, because I don't think, that, okay, if you have, and we'll talk about childhood trauma at some point in this conversation, but, if you have childhood trauma, I'm not going to tell you, hey, pick up my book and you're going to be, skipping down the road. Right. It's to augment the healing work. So you are doing the deep healing work with your clients, just like I am. And then, here are some things that you can do to augment that. One of the many hats I wear is as a yoga teacher. And so in our physical asana practice, the physical practice of yoga, you're constantly physically falling out of balance and bringing yourself back. And so to keep emotional balance, you can't just say, once a week, I'm going to go to a meditation class, because it's going to build up and up and up, and you're going to be flipping out by the time you get there.
It's really, really true. The idea, I hear this from people all the time, like, oh yeah, well, I just have to hold my breath for another couple weeks, then life is going to slow down, or then I have a spa day, or then I have a vacation, or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, but until then, it's your life cannot feel exhausting, and it cannot feel like an emergency, or else things will go wrong. And so just that, we need to eat 3 times a day. I would suggest that we need to be breathing at least that often.
Right. And I look at it from a similar attitude of, we brush our teeth every day to prevent the buildup of cavities, right? Yes. So we need to do these very simple techniques. I'm not talking about, stop and meditate for 20 minutes. I'm talking about simple techniques that you can do in under a minute. Yeah. And when you do them on a regular basis, all of a sudden I don't feel like I have to hold my breath anymore. I can live on purpose and by choice.
Well, let's let's dive into some of your favorites. I know you've already mentioned EFT, and yeah, couldn't agree more. I'd love to know what else you have as your go-to shift things quickly.
This is like the quickest I can think of. I'm not yawning because I'm bored. I'm yawning, Brody, because when you yawn, whether it's like an intentional yawn like I just did, or you just unconsciously yawn, when you do, it's stimulating the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in our body. It goes from our brain all the way down to all of our internal organs in our abdomen. And it's stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. So you can yawn. You don't have to wait until you're out of work to yawn. When I'm working with clients and I see them, they cover their mouth. They're like trying to stifle the yawn. And I'm like, no, let it out.
Embrace that. Yeah.
Like, it's so simple. And yet when we're still stuck in the belief that, I've got to power through for another 3 weeks till I can go away for that spa weekend. No, you don't. Just yawn.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how simple is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Chanting and loud singing and gargling are other ways to stimulate the vagus nerve that people could use pretty instantaneously as well.
Right. And it's okay. Again, I've got 35 different techniques in my book, and it's not because, I want you to learn all 35. I actually have them listed alphabetically, so you don't feel like you have to read, even though it's a very short book. You don't feel like you have to read and learn all of them. You just pick 3, 4 that work for you and do them on a regular basis. And I love to invite people to buddy up with somebody, to take a couple of these techniques and commit to practicing them for 7 days. And accountability buddies, checking in with the other person every single day, because there's a much higher likelihood that you'll actually do it. And then check in with yourself at the end of 7 days and see, I am feeling a little more calm.
I love that, because you're basically just, you're engaging in the self-study practice of noticing, and you're trying to build a new habit. And until that new habit is built, it really does help to have somebody holding you accountable to it. And even because it's not on autopilot yet.
Right. And when we make when we commit to ourselves, we're not quite as likely to keep that commitment.
Unfortunately, that is true. It's kind of a weird double standard that we tend to put other people's needs before our own, even though we know that we are an important part of that equation.
Right.
Our ability to show up. You mentioned earlier the childhood trauma, and I'd love to get back to that, because a lot of people who feel anxious, the roots do go way back. They go to things that we may have experienced growing up in an environment that felt unsafe. And so I'm wondering what you can say to people who might be kind of accepting themselves from this conversation. Like, like my parent was an alcoholic, or I was abused, or I had this terrible thing happen, which has set me up for anxiety. That what could you say to that person?
If it's okay with you, Brody, I want to go 2 tracks on this.
Sure.
Because there is capital T trauma, and then there's small t trauma. Which would you like me to address first?
Whichever you like. Let's talk about both.
Okay, so let's start with the small t trauma, because this will be really fascinating to many people who'll be like, really? So in my work, for 10 years, I had an actual office, and I saw people in my hypnosis practice. And I would find that almost every issue that we were working through was all set in very early childhood, like before the age of reason, before the age of 6 or 7. And many times it was capital T trauma. But if I can share this story about this 62-year-old woman, people would call, they'd make the appointment, I'd write in my book what they were coming in for. And so when I opened my waiting room door, and here was this woman who had like maybe 5 pounds extra, but that was it. I was wondering why she was here to work on weight loss. And when we traced back to what the root cause was, she was like 5 or 6 years old. Her father had brought home this junky jewelry box with the plastic jewels on the outside. And her mother freaked out. How dare you bring her a present? You need to be bringing me presents, blah, 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 blah. Well, the woman comes back the next week and she says, I don't know why, but I don't feel like I need to be perfect anymore. And so that's a small T trauma. From looking at the outside, like, what's the big deal, right?
Yes, as a kid, that could get filed away as being really important.
Yeah. And then what happens is every time we experience, neuroscience talks about how the neurons that wire together fire together. So every experience we have sets off this pattern of these neurons firing together. And every time it happens, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's great when you want to learn something new, but it's not so great when, ooh, I feel like I have to be perfect, gets reinforced, reinforced, reinforced. So that's what I mean about a small T trauma. The even more fascinating and exciting for me, just because I can point to this research, because it's talking about what I've known for all these years. This research was done back in the 1990s, but it only came to light recently, the last several years. And it's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It was 17,000 people, so it's a very big survey group done by the Centers for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente. So this is a really solid research finding. They would ask people 10 simple questions of, did you experience this before the age of 18? And it was about, abuse, whether it was emotional abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse. Did you lose a parent to divorce or death or prison? All these different, 10 of them. And they found this direct correlation that the more you said yes to, the higher you scored on this test. There was a direct correlation to obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, heart disease, and on as adults. You score 4 or more on that quiz, chances are very high that you're going to hit one of those things, or an addiction, or stroke. It's mind-blowing.
And yet so not surprising. Like I hear that and I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that makes so much sense.
Right. And so I've known that for so long, but I didn't have any research to back it up. So a lot of people would just be like, oh, come on, it's your airy fairy stuff. It's like, no, it's not. Here's this study. And so when my book published last year, I was overjoyed that 3 days before publication, Oprah was on 60 Minutes talking about adverse childhood experiences and saying, the question is not, what's wrong with you? The question is, what happened to you?
Yeah, exactly. That it's not intrinsic about something that is part of your identity or who you are, but there is very definitely a ripple from the past.
Yeah, and you and I both know, though, that doesn't mean that you can't short circuit that.
Exactly.
We can do the healing work and let that be. One of the things that I get so excited about when I'm doing the deep healing work like that is we're actually changing the cellular memory. And our bodies, every 7 years, all the cells have been replicated. Every 7 years, it's like there's a whole new you. And yet the cellular memory gets transferred. So when we do the deep healing work and we change that and then augment it with daily practices of emptying the stress bucket, emptying the anxiety, then we're not destined to have depression or suicide attempts or cancer as adults. Then we're on this path of being able to live a healthy, joyful life.
When you talk about changing the cellular memory, you're not talking about just getting out of fight or flight, right? You're talking about something different. So walk us through that. How can people understand what it means to change cellular memory, and how is this done?
Well, it's something that you can't do yourself. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I am really good at helping you with that, but I can't work on my own deep stuff. So, if your listeners just Google ACEs quiz, they'll be able to pop it up on their computer and they can take the test. And if you score 4 or more, I would please encourage you to find somebody to work with to work on those, because it's not enough to just sit and talk about it, because it's not on the conscious level. Albert Einstein said years ago, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. So these deep wounds are in our cellular memory. They're in our subconscious. And so I can't say like exactly how to do it because it's like a gift that I have. And I'm not the only one, that has this gift, but it's almost like going on a little hunt, a little exploration. And by trusting your higher self and your wise mind, we can always go right to where it needs to be. And it's like peeling an onion. It's not like, and it's certainly not from a conscious level, because if somebody comes in, I'll use it where it's not a severe trauma. I have a webpage, sheconquersfear.com, and you can see this beautiful young woman skydiving out of an airplane and co-piloting a small airplane. And yet she came to me for incredible fear of flying. She was not going on her family vacation. And her mother said, "Oh, we know exactly when it started, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Oh, maybe not." And it wasn't that issue. And so if I had said, "Okay, let's go back and look at that time when you were on the plane with your aunt and she was freaking out," I wouldn't have been able to help her to get to that deep level of healing. It was trusting that, she was going to help. I could help guide her so she could take me exactly to where that root cause was. And I love that Sarah gave me permission to, put this web page up, because you can see this woman does not look like she's afraid to fly.
Was the modality there? Was that hypnotherapy?
Oh, it's a combination. It's hard to say because nothing I do stands alone.
Yeah.
It just can't.
Oh yeah. I totally get that. Like it can be really hard to tease out when you're doing more than one modality with someone, but yeah, just curious.
Right. No, and when I had my hypnosis practice for the first couple of years, I had a structure to it. And, first we'd do the tapping and then we'd do this and, blah, blah, blah. And then when I really started to see the magic was when I just let that all go. I threw it out the window and just got into the moment and, oh, okay, let's go here. Oh, let's do this.
So really a fairly intuitive process then.
Not fairly, incredibly intuitive.
Incredibly. All right. Well, that's great. And really when I think about kind of like the acupuncture approach, like there are certainly like particular indications for particular points and meridians that can deal with particular psycho-emotional issues. But yes, it's certainly not something that you can like plug into a formula. It really it comes out of having a connected conversation with someone and
exactly.
And seeing kind of like where the chi is, like what's alive in that moment. Because a lot of times like the same treatment, even on a different day, could have a very different result.
Yes.
If you've got a healthy curiosity, you want to know how you can be doing right by your body and how to live a more mindful, streamlined life in accordance with your values. While I love that you tune into the show every week, are you taking action? If not, why not? Here are the top 3 roadblocks that could be holding you back. 1, thinking that knowing is doing. They're different things. Knowing the properties of verbs is different than actually taking them. Knowing how to change a habit is different than actually changing up your routine. Knowing is the first step, but the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 100th steps involve action. Number 2, thinking that because you're smart and used to being successful, that you need to do it all yourself. This one dogged me for years as an independent-minded overachiever. That is, until I realized that 1, I can't see my own blind spots, and 2, I don't know what I don't know. Now, I'd much rather work with a guide who can point out the shortcut for the path I want to travel rather than get lost in the woods alone. Not only is it way easier, but I'm more likely to show up for myself if I've told my coach or my mastermind partners what I'm trying to do. Reason number 3, thinking that you don't have the money. What we spend money on is a reflection of what we're prioritizing. Maybe it's time to prioritize you. I'm opening up my calendar for a handful of one-on-one coaching clients. I've helped thousands of women break up with stress, optimize their habits, mood, hormones, weight, and vitality with integrative body-mind tools from Chinese medicine, yoga, neuroscience, coaching, and ancient wisdom. Just as importantly, I pour my heart into each of my clients, and you will feel that love in every single interaction. If you're ready to feel more calm and confident in your own skin, start feeling younger every year, feeling like you're at the center of your own life rather than just getting through it, and feel loved and supported in the process, head over to the Work With Me page at brodywelch.com and apply to work with me one-on-one. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. Now back to the show. Right before we hopped on the call together, we were just chatting about our concern for the future, in the sense that levels of anxiety and stress in young adults are really at crisis levels. And I'd love for you to speak directly to people out there who either are just starting out as young people in the world, or who maybe know or are parenting a young adult, as to what advice would you give them in terms of starting to get a handle on anxiety? Because we know that the pressures on young people, like, first of all, just the things like crushing college debt and things like, and the economy being one, but also like global issues that seem hopeless. And, just so many people, it seems, it seems like it would be a really tough thing to be trying to manage all that young people today have to manage.
Kids, teens, and young adults, they are experiencing crisis levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's snowballed. And honestly, like when you're talking about college campuses or schools, they don't have the resources. They don't have the resources to know how to address this. There was a study done with 60,000 college students. So again, a really big sample. 63% of them, like, let that number sink in. 63%, an overwhelming majority of them said that they had experienced overwhelming anxiety in the past 12 months. That's insane. That's insane.
It's really epidemic.
And then this is from a couple of years ago, but a 2015 Child Mind Institute study said that 80% of children with anxiety do not receive treatment. And so this is why I'm on a soapbox about this, because I've been saying for years, we need to be teaching kids how to, deal with their emotions. I used to say cope with them, but I don't anymore, because I know that we can get on the other side of it. It's not managing or coping. It's overcoming it and getting to the other side. And so the techniques in my book are simple. They're simple enough that most of them you can teach to young children. And it's for a reason, because if, again, I kept saying, if we need to teach this in schools, we need to teach this in schools. And then this book birthed out of me. And I was like, oh, great. Okay. So now how do I get these in schools? So modeling the Tom Shoes and Bombas socks, where they, you buy one, they give one. For every book I sell, I give one to a school or organization that will teach some of these skills. And they're slowly starting to come in. There are some enlightened teachers and schools that are bringing some yoga and mindfulness into the classrooms. I would love to see it even more that, teacher's got an out of control class, and she says, all right, everybody stop. Let's do square breathing. You draw a square, and you take your finger and trace your finger around the square. And as you breathe across the top of it, you breathe into the count of 4. So inhale, 2, 3, 4. As you go down the outside of the square, hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. As you exhale across the bottom, 2, 3, 4. Again, up, and now hold, 2, 3, 4. So you do 3 or 4 rounds of that, where you inhale to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4. All of a sudden, you have a much calmer classroom. And that's not taking away from teaching time.
Yeah, no, it seems like, how long did that take, right? Like about 30 seconds or less.
Right.
And people are in a very different space. And I think I see that with adults too, right? That we're so focused on just getting it done or just powering through that we forget to just stop and be human for a moment. Maybe just to acknowledge what's going on, give ourselves a moment of compassion, like naming what's stressing us out or what we're buying into, and just breathing for a minute or two. That a lot of times that kind of reframe can lead to far greater productivity for the rest of the day.
Right. And another one that I absolutely love is, because I'm like really foundation of gratitude. Gratitude is the number one predictor of well-being, according to a 2003 study. Simple gratitude. And so sometimes, though, it's like all you can see is what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. So take a moment. What's right now?
Yes. Yes. And getting attached to what's right now and amplifying that is one of those ways that we shift what the brain looks for in the world, right? Like that
Exactly.
we overcome the default mode where we are looking for what we're used to looking for, and where we change the brain to be able to suddenly be oriented towards appreciation.
Yeah. And the only way you can do that is to keep doing it and keep
Yes.
doing it and repeat and repeat and repeat. It's not a one and done. You don't go to the gym and expect to get buff on the first time. You don't take one piano lesson and expect to play like Beethoven. It takes practice. But like, what would be more important in your life than allowing yourself to come to a place of balance and peace and joy?
And that's really it. Yeah. The fact that it has to be a regular practice, I can't underscore that enough. Like it's like nobody can do it for you. You have to make the time to do it. And you have to believe that it's worth doing, and that you have to believe that you're capable of change in order to do it at all. And so it's the kind of thing where I could not agree more. Like, just to anyone listening, that like taking the time to take care of yourself is the most important thing you can do for everyone in your life, for your work in the world, and for your ability to, and it's the number one most important thing you can do for your health.
Well, and what do they say on the airplane? Every single time, put the oxygen mask on first. Right.
Yes, before
And then
assisting other
help
customers.
others. And so what we do though, as mothers, and my kids are adults now, but we want to take care of the kids, take care of the kids, take care of the kids. Guess what, folks? Anxious kids have anxious parents.
It's really true.
So we don't need to be looking at, oh, my kid has anxiety. Let me, focus on them. All right. Guess what? We can look at them, but we have to look at you too.
Really, really true. And role modeling that, you can even, potentially do it together. It can potentially be something that you practice with your kids. I'm curious if you have experience that anxiety that comes up, as I mentioned earlier in my world. Anxiety for me these days is something that, for just a couple of days a month, that are invisible to me because I've gone through menopause. But I am still in this very clear hormonal cycle. And for a couple days a month, my self-care toolbox, I'm like relying on it all the time because things just do not feel okay. I feel like I lack the hormonal resources to get my body into that state of calm. And it makes me feel like an imposter because I do meditate every day and I do work out every day and I do, I'm doing all the things. And yet there is this hormonal amplifier that makes it difficult. I'm curious if you have anything in your toolbox that specifically speaks to that hormonal amplifier that a lot of women deal with, whether it's premenopause or whether it's perimenopausal hormonal stuff, or the whatever I'm dealing with. Probably reversing menopause is what's going on for me. But curious about that.
The first thing that comes to mind is I would look to essential oils. You and I, that's one common thing in our toolbox. And boy, oh boy, there's an oil for everything. And, so you're saying this and I'm like, ooh, the women's blend.
Yeah. We had an earlier show with Dr. Marisa Snyder, who just wrote a bestseller on essential oils, and she has a hormone blend that I love and that is in my purse, and that people can download that at the website brodywelch.com if interested. What are your favorite essential oils?
It's really tough to say because, Brody, if you could see what I'm looking at right now, you'd see at least 100 bottles.
Yeah.
Because they're just amazing. Can I share with you what I shared with you before we started?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So we just experienced a miracle with my husband. In September, he had a biopsy of something that was on his skin, and it took 2 months to get the results because, what is this? Oh, this doesn't look good. So let's send it off to the specialist in the country. So it took us 2 months to get the results. And, we're sorry, you have this incredibly rare fatal cancer. 30% survival rate at 1 year with treatment, 0% at 2. So, okay, let's see what else we can do. And we did a couple of different healing modalities, specific anti-cancer green juices, wild blueberries. If you Google medical medium and wild blueberries, you'll be just amazed at what he says about how this is the superfood for any issue. But specifically, he says there's not a cancer that it cannot prevent. And then one of my little favorites that we did, and he's continuing to do, is some specific essential oils, because we knew before we went to the specialist that he'd already beaten it. We'd already gotten rid of it. And we went and they didn't say, oh my gosh, this is a miracle. Oh my gosh, you don't have cancer. They were just kind of like, I'm not sure about this. And they again tested it and saw that original biopsy, it had this very rare, very fatal cancer. And yet on winter solstice in December, he had another surgery just to take the last of the scar that was on there. And on the darkest day of the year, I get the phone call saying, there's no cancer there. I said, yeah, I know. So I can't say it was the healing modalities, it was the essential oils, it was the green juices, it was the wild blueberries. It was a combination of all of it. And so again, I am not saying it was one thing, but I'm just sharing, like, okay, this was our experience.
You're speaking to the power of synergy. When you decide that you need to make a change and you're throwing a lot of things at it, it kind of doesn't matter which one is the thing that moves the needle, because probably all of them are having an effect. And the point isn't to prove a randomized double-blind study of your controlled life where you're not doing these things. The point is
right
to get through what in this case was a remarkable challenge. So that's a really inspiring story.
Marie Forleo says everything is figure-outable.
Yes.
Right? And so it is, right? I just sent her my story for her book, because it is figure-outable. You get a cancer diagnosis like that. I mean, I'm talking this incredibly rare. There's so little research on it because it's such a rare cancer. And then, with treatment, which means you're going to have a really horrible quality of life, you have a 1/3 chance you're going to live to a year. You have 0 chance that you're going to live to 2. Thank you. Let's see what else is there. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And being able to trust ourselves that we can figure things out in the future.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean, I'm not saying, okay, I am in no way saying, okay, do this. If you have cancer, do this, and it's going to help you get rid of it. I am not saying that at all. I'm just sharing, okay, this is possible. So if you have a challenge, whatever it is figure-outable. And so you and I both have that wonderful full set of tools in the toolboxes, because, let's find out what's the right thing for you at this moment. And maybe at the next visit, it's something different. With the essential oils, I'll always check in before I get online with a client. Okay, what oil is going to be best for this? I did that for this conversation, and sure enough, the client will get on and say, "Look what oil I got," and I'll read them, the message behind what that oil does. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm dealing with right now, and so. My favorite essential oils are all of them.
So just to acknowledge the fact that the work that you do is highly intuitive. A lot of times people who are highly intuitive are permeable to other people's energy and don't necessarily realize that what they're picking up on energetically is actually not even theirs. It's like someone else's. I'm curious if you've ever had to deal with that personally and what tools help you deal with it.
I did. And, I didn't understand it. Like, whoa, I will tell you, if your listeners are going, oh, that sounds like me, I would highly recommend that you get the Empath's Survival Guide by Dr. Judith Orloff. She's an MD and she's an empath. And when I read that book, I was highlighting it going, oh my gosh, this is me, this is me, this is me. And so she offers up a whole bunch of different techniques to be able to preemptively shield yourself or in the moment shield yourself. Because if you are an empath, if you pick that up, then I remember one time I went into New York City and I came back. This is before I realized what an empath was. And I came back and I got incredibly ill. And I thought I had the flu. And my intuitive chiropractor said, no, you picked up all that dirty energy. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I have a protective blend of essential oils that I put on every time before I go outside, just to protect myself.
And is there a chief oil in there that you'd care to share?
No, because it's a blend of all kinds of amazing things. I'm with doTERRA and it's called On Guard, but there's other companies and it was called Thieves Blend because
I know Thieves.
This blend, they couldn't figure out back in the medieval times during the plague, they couldn't figure out how grave robbers would go and loot the graves and not get the plague. And literally the king had them come and said, how do you do this? What is this magic? And it was this blend of essential oils. So people who think, oh, essential oils are new age. No, they've been around forever. So hello, why am I not going to put a couple of drops on this before I go outside and not pick up whatever germs are going around? And then I have another blend that is like a spiritual protection blend. And let me put my readers on and I can tell you, I can read these little labels I have on here. It's frankincense, Terra Shield, which is an insect repellent blend, On Guard, which I just mentioned, and Melaleuca.
Nice. I appreciate that. When I was in acupuncture school, I went through a period of actually having the dreams of some of the kids that I was working on.
Oh my gosh.
So just really being in their field. And one of the things, and obviously like feeling really just not okay about that. And I had to learn about energetic shielding back then. And
and we all do. I think, anybody who heard you say, you taking on other people's energies went, oh, I'm not the only one. Go get that book. Because for me, reading her book was so freeing. It was like, oh, okay, now I understand that, before I go into this situation, I can preemptively set myself up to just kind of have my own little bubble around me. Great.
Yeah, exactly. There's a Qigong move that I'd like to just describe to people out there listening, if something to put into practice right away. And it's a movement called drawing the aura. And essentially it's starting with your hands in diamond mudra. So thumbs touching, palms flat, right hand on top for women, left hand on top for men, at the level of the navel. And then as you inhale, you sweep the arms up overhead. And as you exhale, you draw them down to either side while envisioning yourself kind of in the middle of this energetic field. And so you're essentially putting up this bubble of protection around yourself, and just hang out in that bubble and visualize yourself in your own energy field. And that's something that you can do before going into a crowd.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's something that I find really, really helps me a lot. I know we are just about out of time here, and I wanted to give people an opportunity to connect with you if they're interested in reading your book or doing some work with you. Where can they find you?
My website is my name, StephanieDalfonzo.com. Hopefully you'll put that in the show notes because they're not going to know how to spell it. You can start if you don't want to buy the whole book, it's not that expensive, but if you want to just get a little taste, you can get 5 techniques directly from my book at 5easyways-to-calm-anxiety.com. And if you want to get the book, it's on Amazon, it's in paperback and Kindle. And again, we talked before and during the show how you and I both have such a place in our hearts for the kids, teens, and young adults. And so you can feel really good if you buy my book, know that one will be donated. I've already donated books to Dr. Nadine Burke Harris's Center for Youth Wellness. She's at the forefront of the ACEs movement, and the Clifford Beers Clinic in Connecticut, who also is in the forefront with the ACEs movement. So you can feel good about it if you buy it. And it was written in a spirit of sharing it. I've had a lot of people say, I bought 5 copies and gave 4 to friends for holiday gifts. So it's something to think about, that if you know somebody who's struggling, or somebody who has a teenager or a young adult who's struggling with anxiety, give them the book.
Such a beautiful, beautiful offering. And I'll make sure that that's in the show notes.
Thank you.
Coincidentally, I also have on my website a 5 biohacks to relieve stress. as a free download. If you head over to brodywelch.com, you can grab that. You can compare it to Stephanie's and see what what we both recommend.
And mix and match them together.
Absolutely. Yes. Because it really is not a one size fits all thing. Stephanie Dalfonzo, thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing the work that you're doing in the world. It's so important. And I just really appreciate your time.
Oh, Brody, thank you so much. I love what you're doing in the world. And I really, really appreciate this conversation. And you and I will stay connected, my friend.
I can tell. Yes. Let's. Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.